the exam. I'm not going to teach anything. I'm just going to talk to you at leisure about pulmonary hypertension, what comes in my mind. Some of it may be of use to your exam. Some of it may be of use in other than exam. So let's talk about pulmonary hypertension. Before we start, I have something more fundamental to tell. We are all comfortably in our homes and trying to learn, but there is a fundamental issue about knowledge. It's an old saying that he who is seeking knowledge should give up comfort, and who is seeking comfort should give up learning knowledge. Now, if you want to learn new knowledge, we cannot be so comfortable as we are nowadays that you will download all these webinars and then read it some other time. That wouldn't happen. So COVID will not last always. As soon as COVID is over, we'll get back to our bedside, because that is where medicine is learned and medicine is practiced. So till then, let us make best use of whatever is available, and we will talk about pulmonary hypertension. Now, for a seminar like this, I understand that people are at various level of exposure and people have different expectations. I'm not very sure what shall I do, but what I thought is we will just keep a core message, core curriculum at a medium level. So this is not for somebody who is very well into the PAH, but this will generally picking up the basic issues about pulmonary hypertension. Pulmonary hypertension diagnosis is important. No matter what cardiac case you have, you are supposed to make diagnosis of PVH, PH, whether it is there or not there, how much it is there. And pulmonary hypertension in general is underdiagnosed. So many causes are there for PH, and numerous factors influence the management of PH patient. So in that kind of a situation, I think the best thing to do is to think physiologically about pulmonary artery hypertension. And when we start with physiological thinking, here are some issues for you. So let us see, what do you think is the normal PA pressure? So you can answer. Unfortunately, I cannot see you, and answer. Talking without your feedback is a little difficult for me. This is very new. So you think for yourself, what is the normal PA pressure you would guess, you would like to tell me? How much PA pressure can rise when a normal person exercises? What is the normal pulmonary vascular resistance? How much pressure can a normal RV generate? What happens if you occlude one branch of pulmonary artery? So answers to these will influence our understanding of the pulmonary circulation. So it turns out that the normal pressure is not more than 14 millimeter. Normal mean PA pressure is 14 millimeter. And it across the board and numerous people. And also it is important to state here that even in children, beyond first 3 months, the PA pressure normal is around 14 millimeter only. Although we tend to equate it with systemic pressure half and things like that, normal PA pressure in children and adults beyond 3 months is only 14 millimeter of mercury. So that even if the PA pressure has become 20, you think there is already a high PA pressure.
Height self view, high non video pass नहीं height self view कर दूँ ना?
Can I continue?
Please continue, sir. Please continue.
Okay. So when we exercise, there is a recruitment in the lungs. In the lungs, usually, exercising PA pressure is difficult to quantitate. It increases with age. But the cutoff that we have kept is that normal on exercise, routinely PA pressure will not go beyond 30 millimeter mercury. PA mean. Normal PVR, what is the normal PVR? We say PVR normal is, less than 5, 6, 7 Woods. Now, when we talk of Woods, it is in 1, 2, 3, 4. So we miss a point. If we would have talked in normal Dians, that is Wood into 80. So normal PVR is only 1 to 2 Wood units, which means if the PVR goes by 4, 5, you appreciate that the cardiac transplant is contraindicated if the pulmonary vascular resistance is more than 5 Wood units. Liver transplant cannot be done if the PVR is more than 5 Woods. So although it is 1 to 3, it looks very simple, but between 2 and 3 and 4 Wood units, there is a miles of difference. So normal PVRI is less than 2 Wood units. Normal RV can acutely generate about 50 to 60 millimeter mercury pressure. So should you have a patient in casualty with RV pressure of 80, it's probably a chronic, or 90, then it means it is an acute and chronic situation. What happens if you occlude a PA branch in PA pressure? Nothing happens. Normal lung has enough reserve so that occluding one branch does not increase PA pressure. Conversely, if that means one lung is gone by parenchymal disease, the pulmonary pressure do not go up. So for pulmonary pressure to go up because of lung diseases, you need to have a lot of lung disease, lot of parenchymal damage. Why I'm bringing out this is just, often you say there is a component of LRTI in PH patient. So just think how much LRTI can change a PA pressure. Gross hypoxia can change because hypoxia is a very gross vasoconstrictor. Normal LRTI, a little bit of lung disease does not increase PA pressure. Now, if there is a baby with one pulmonary artery only, in that setting, the PA pressure is quite high. So in adult, when the lungs are full grown, one occlusion doesn't make a difference, but a single pulmonary artery in a child is associated with severe PH. What are the vasoconstrictors? We know all hypoxia is a severe vasoconstrictor, acidosis is a severe vasoconstrictor, and hypercarbia is a vasoconstrictor also. So at this juncture, I would just like to bring in, nowadays we do permissive hypercarbia, so that if you ventilate less and let the patient have hypercarbia, how much of carbon dioxide is allowed to increase PA pressure? So what are the limits of permissible hypercarbia? That's what the point I'm trying to bring. You see, acidosis is a very severe vasoconstrictor. Hypercarbia is not that bad. Hypoxia in some circumstances is bad. So when you are trying to keep permissive hypercarbia or you hyperventilate for managing pH, there are 2-3 issues which one should be clear. That normally we do not cross a pH of 7.2 when we create permissive hypercarbia, and we do not cross PaCO2 beyond 70. Although PaCO2 up to 300 is also compatible with life. Other way around, when we are doing hyperventilation to decrease PA pressure, generally hyperventilation to reduce PA pressure is not a good idea. Why? Because with hyperventilation, PaCO2 comes down. And when PaCO2 comes down, what is it which is troubling the body? With decreasing PaCO2, there is a cerebral vasoconstriction, which is never a good idea. So even in traumatic situation where with increased cerebral pressure, you want to reduce hyperventilate, you do not do it too much. So remember, PaCO2 below 30 is a bad idea for cerebral vasoconstriction, and we do not tend to include it. All right. Now, when the lungs collapses, what happens to PVR? Is the collapsed lung which increases PVR, or an emphysematous lung which increases PVR? It turns out that both of them increase PVR. So PVRI is best at its lowest when the lung is in optimal lung volume. So considerations such as these would be important in our physiological approach to PA pressures. Now, when your patient of PH can come at any of this stage, what happens, the natural history of PH, there is a pre-symptomatic phase when the RV is able to handle. Then there are symptoms, and when the RV progressively worsens, then there are heart failure and there is a decline. What is happening to PVR? PVRI in some diseases can go on progressively worsening. One of the jobs that you must understand or try to understand is what are the reasons for increasing PVRI in any disease process. Most of the disease processes like Eisenmenger, primary pulmonary hypertension, have a progressively worsening PVR. And what happens? The vessels keep on closing by, with time. So PVRI goes on worsening, and when PVRI worsens, heart is able to handle up to some time with the RV hypertrophy, and then RV starts failing. Now remember, when RV starts failing, the PA pressure may in fact fall. So like some of the patients, when we try to do port shunt nowadays, we think we want a suprasystemic PA pressure, but it might well happen that with fall in RV function, PA pressure actually comes down, whereas actually the resistance is very high. So this slide basically demonstrates what happens, what are the limits of a normal pulmonary, normal pulmonary responses, normal RV responses. As long as cardiac output is maintained, nothing much happens. Patient is a little bit asymptomatic, and therefore PH is a cardiac disease. It's not a lung disease, because the primary determinant of mortality is the heart response to it. Well, so what next? So let us define pulmonary hypertension. What is pulmonary hypertension? We say PA mean pressure more than 25 is pulmonary hypertension. With that, you have to have PA wedge less than 15 if it is a pre-capillary pulmonary hypertension. If the wedge pressure is more than 15, like the left heart disorders, then PA pressure will automatically rise. And so then you have post-capillary pulmonary hypertension with a wedge pressure of more than 15 and a systolic pressure more than 25. How do we think about this? So when you have increase in PA pressure and increase in wedge pressure, we tend to think of a transpulmonary gradient. What is happening in the lung circuit? So if there is a transpulmonary gradient of more than 15, which means PA mean minus LA pressure, if it is more than 15 transpulmonary gradient, we say there is a lung vasculature disease, there is a pulmonary vascular disease. And if it's less than 15, we say the lung vessels are okay, it is all transmitted, back pressure is transmitted. So it's isolated post-capillary. Now what is better? Is it a transpulmonary gradient better or diastolic pulmonary gradient is better? So transpulmonary gradient means PA mean minus LA pressure. That will vary with PA systolic also. It will vary with PA pressure, PA pulmonary flow. So therefore, transpulmonary gradient is not as good as diastolic pulmonary gradient, and now we tend to talk of diastolic pulmonary gradient. So diastolic pulmonary gradient normally PA diastolic and LA pressures are within 3 to 4 millimeter of each other. We say maximum 7 millimeter. So if the PA diastolic is more than 7 millimeter above LA pressure or PA wedge pressure, then we think that there is some pulmonary vascular disease and there is a pre-capillary component. Patient of mitral stenosis, for example, if he has a LA of 25, the normal lung would have a LA PA diastolic of 30 or less than that, like that. So diastolic pulmonary gradient of 7 is the cutoff. Transpulmonary gradient, PA mean minus LA is 15 millimeters the cutoff. And that would mean that there is no pulmonary vascular disease by itself. and otherwise there will be pulmonary vascular disease. Now I can see some of you wincing already that it is not PA mean 25, but latest the sixth World Society has made it PA pressure 20, and currently everybody say PA mean of 20. So I would like you to understand why did we make it 20. It is not good enough to follow that previously it was 25, so we say 25, now it's 20, so we say 20. What is it which had made this change from 25 to 20 as a cause of PAH? Remember we said normal PA pressure is 14 and the standard deviation was 3. So 14 plus 6, that means 2 standard deviation makes it 20. So it has been found that vast majority of the time PA pressure mean more than 20 would indicate a disease. Previously we thought 20 to 25 may be a borderline situation, but now people have got more data to say that when they have 20 to 25 also the disease could progress. So when they said PA pressure of more than 20, and it also, so in this the latest change, what are the changes? One change is that the PA mean has been made from 25 to 20. They also added the concept of PVR, and we'll come to that in a minute. And they've also made minor changes in the grouping so that one can read. So as of now, we say PA pressure more than 20 mean is pulmonary hypertension. If there is a wedge pressure of less than 15 with a mean of 20, we say it is a pre-capillary hypertension. If the wedge is also more than 15, we say post-capillary hypertension. In such setting, the diastolic pressure gradient will be less than 7. Otherwise, the diastolic gradient will be more than 7 millimeter mercury. And then there are disorders according to this classification. So let us see, just for the clarity's sake, you have an increased PA pressure. When do you have increased PA pressure but no pulmonary vascular disease? So suppose PA mean is instead of 20 or 15, it is about 40. But suppose that particular patient has a high pulmonary blood flow, then there is no pulmonary vascular disease. And or suppose there is that particular patient had high LA pressure, so therefore everything was back pressure, so therefore there was no pulmonary disease. And how do we distinguish between these two? So then we have to bring in the concept of pulmonary vascular resistance, because when PA pressure minus pulmonary wedge pressure divided by pulmonary blood flow, if it is normal, then we say pulmonary vascular resistance is normal, and it is less than 2 or 3 units. If it is more than 3 units, then we say there is a pulmonary vascular disease, and there is, so pulmonary hypertension could be because of pulmonary vascular disease type 1, or it could be because of increased pulmonary wedge pressure type 2, and things like that. The converse of it is not very well understood. That means, can you have pulmonary vascular disease with normal PA pressure? What are the settings where you could have normal PA pressure, but there is some pulmonary vascular disease? Now, such thing can happen. Suppose the pulmonary flow is very little, so that your QP is very low, and even 20 PA mean pressure could give you a PVR which is higher than 3. Such things could happen in Fontan circuits and in some of the other situations. People have now appreciated that one can be having thromboembolic PH without resting PA pressure. So that means you could have a thromboembolic disease without a PA pressure raise. So these arguments are being brought forward just to make you understand that it is the critical element of understanding in pulmonary vasculature is the pulmonary vascular resistance. So what is pulmonary vascular resistance? Pulmonary vascular resistance PA mean minus PA wedge divided by pulmonary blood flow. High pulmonary blood flow can give you PA pressure high without a pulmonary vascular disease, and vice versa. Remember, pulmonary vascular resistance is indexed. Normally, it is indexed with body surface area, but the index value is multiplied. So it is the Wood units into millimeter per square. It is not, PVR is equal to Wood unit per square meter. It is Wood unit into millimeter square because the QP is in the denominator. If you make it QPI, then it actually increases, which means in an infant, the PVRI will be lower than PVR, and in an adult, because you will multiply by more than 1, the PVRI will be higher than PVR. Resistance in electrical circuit, it is quite equal to electrical circuit. You can think the resistance in electrical circuit is equal to voltage and the flow, and it is otherwise measured as 8 NL by pi into R square. 4 R is the diameter of the vessel. So you can imagine a slight diameter of the pulmonary artery can make a lot of difference to the pulmonary vascular resistance. So in this formula, L is the length. So if you have a lot of length available, a lot of lungs available, the PVRI is low. But if less length is available, then PVRI is high. So what is N in this equation? You can write for yourself what is N in 8 NL by pi R4, telling about resistance. So N is here viscosity, and that brings another point that when we talk of resistance, we don't really take viscosity. So for the same degree of everything else, if somebody has a high viscosity, for example 22 hemoglobin, his PVR increases markedly. Actually, if you compute this, you will realize that a change in viscosity of 2 from 17 to 22 makes a lot of change, but this factor is generally not considered except in serious congenital heart diseases. Well, so all in all, leave this aside. Finally, you would have a patient with pulmonary hypertension. Either he will have congenital heart disease, or he will have IPH and its variant, or he might have lung disease, he may have multivalvular or left heart disease, or he may have CTPH or a combination of all this. So when we say IPH and its variant, you have portopulmonary hypertension, you have connective tissue disorders, and you have Eisenmenger syndrome. That is type 1. Now you don't like this kind of simple approach and you want that PAH approach class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can have that. But this is simple for exams and this brings out simple things. So a couple of things I want to clarify. Suppose you have a patient with Eisenmenger, or you have a patient with portopulmonary hypertension, or you have a patient with scleroderma. What is the histopathology in their lungs? Is it same? Is it similar? Or are they different? So all type 1 have a similar histopathology. Heath-Edwards class 1 to 6, 5 is applicable for all type 1 patients. All type 2 patients will have their different kind of histopathology, but if they have a pre and post capillary, then pre-capillary component could also bring out such histopathology. And you have a combination of all this. For a clinician, combination part is very important. You have a patient with marginal lung disease and also a severe PH. So how much of it is because of lung, how much of it is because of heart, and that kind of things will make your clinical assessment a little more complex and a little more interesting also. So for the time being, suppose we say we have a patient with pulmonary hypertension in exam. See, patient will not come with a diagnosis. Patient will come with some symptoms and we have to make a diagnosis. So when do we think of PH? And you know that if patient has dyspnea, has fatigue, has syncope, angina, hemoptysis, ascites, edema, cyanosis, we think of pulmonary hypertension. In the science, if there are parasternal lift, loud P2, right ventricle third and fourth sounds, TR, PR, we think of pulmonary hypertension. So let us analyze this in a little bit of more detail for somebody who is not very well into it. Now, simple questions: what causes dyspnea? And you will be it is a remarkable blind spot for cardiologists. Having become a cardiologist, we forget the general system totally. I have never found an answer to this question by a cardiologist saying anything other than PVH. For a cardiologist, dyspnea is only PVH. If you ask more forcefully a bright student, what causes dyspnea and PVH? He might say J receptors. And there the answer stops. So we must have a holistic approach to dyspnea. We must recognize that dyspnea is a very peculiar symptom. If you see the definition of dyspnea nowadays, dyspnea is a subjective discomfort, varying quality of varying intensity. Meaning thereby the dyspnea occurs in various shades. Dyspnea occurs from many disorders. Dyspnea is not